Hello, welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and the opinions expressed here are solely opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. As always, to interact with us, we love seeing you live on Thursday nights, and we are over on Facebook, on YouTube, and love chatting with you live. What the great thing is now when you chat with us live, you get to throw all the fun comments at us, and some of your comments might even end up on the show. As always, if you can't catch us live, then always listen to us in your favorite podcasting app. You know me? My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And next up for his introduction is not Joe, it's Jason. Just because.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Jason Richards here, past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C., Lafayette Lodge number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio, and officially a member of the Old Guys Club with the rest of TMR.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday. Nice. Well, awesome. Good to see you here. Last but not least, another old guy, Joe Martinez.
Yes. Hello.
What's going on, worshipful?
Cool cats and kittens. Yeah. Joe Martinez. Still worshipful master of Manassas Lodge number 182. I think I got my mic fixed, so sorry for the sound issues last week, but great to be here. Super jazzed about the topic, and happy birthday, Big J. Love you, man.
Smooches. Love you too.
Smooches.
Nice.
Kisses.
Awesome.
No tongue.
All right. Well, as we dive in, I want to give a special shout out to the patrons who support the show. You guys rock our socks. So if you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable to keep the show going for many, many years to come. Thanks, guys. You guys rock. Many, many years. At least till 2040.
2040.
At least till 2040.
Damn you. I thought we blocked
Too
Sun
soon.
Card.
I think we need to tighten the security controls here. Good stuff. Yay. Happy birthday, Jason.
Yes.
All right. So, normal order of business. Let's go over to the tarot card of the week. And let's do, how about this, Jason? Why don't you pull a 4-card spread? Right. Okay. So I want you to look through your deck. Oh, look at that. You just happen to have 4 cards at the ready.
How fortuitous.
Wow. It's like we planned it. What 4 cards do we have, Jason?
So, we have the Ace of Pentacles.
Love it.
The Ace of Cups.
Love that one too.
The Ace of Swords. Yeah, like
love that one.
Love
gold foil Art Nouveau tarot deck. Like freaking cool. And then my favorite, the Ace of Wands.
Nice.
So I just also happen to have a picture of them.
Why did you randomly choose those?
Yes.
I didn't randomly choose those. I mean,
you ruined the effect.
I randomly went through the deck and pulled them out totally at random, except I could only choose from the aces, and I had to choose 4.
Yes. Right. Because
and I don't cheat in poker, so I didn't.
Not at extras. All. You just gotta literally has an ace up the sleeve. So the 4 elements also correspond, for those who don't know, to the suits in the general tarot decks, right? So whether they be the coins, cups, swords, and wands, or pentacles, etc., like they are related. And so just to give you the big spoiler alert, the coins or pentacles relate to the element of earth. The material plane, and then you have the emotional water-based cups. And you can actually see water pouring out of the cup in the ace. You have the airy sword, not Aries, but in the air.
AIRY.
They slice through the air, and then you take this wooden wand and set it ablaze. So you have a fiery wand.
I'm sorry. That
wand,
looks
wand,
like a whipping
phallus.
stick. It does not look like
fire,
a wand.
passion.
That's a big club right there.
Like I think of Harry Potter when I think of wand. That looks like somebody's gonna get their tiny whoop hard.
It's like a caveman wand right there.
You know, like behind a dumpster or something. Like just getting
Yeah, so we're going to learn a lot about these four elements and keep these cards in mind because the four elements show up in a lot of different places with a lot of different symbology. And the beautiful part of this is we're going to cover a little bit of the history, a little bit of the structure in tonight's episode about the classical elements, but yet one show can't contain all of this awesomeness. So we are actually going to dive deeper in future episodes per element. So stay tuned for another
5
multi-part
episode
Woo!
series.
Can't wait.
Yep, it'll be good.
Right. You wanted long form, you got long form. Here we go. Awesome. So let's begin. So we
And
are
next
talking about
week-
that.
Next week we will we'll do the
Oh,
tarot
look at
card
that.
of the week with
I like it.
with my new deck, the Millennial Tarot.
Noise.
Does that come with avocado toast?
It has avocados on the reverse of all the cards.
I love
I
it.
freaking hate avocado toast. I'm sorry.
Oh,
West
I'm
Coaster.
sorry. You're breaking up.
Nope.
So what? Oh, look, we lost Joe. I don't know what happened. Oh, you came back.
Hi.
Sorry about that.
Hi.
The classical elements is what tonight's episode is on. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, you guessed it, earth, air, fire, and water, and a little bit of where they came from. So why don't we start with, who do we want to start with that goes the further back in history from a historical context? Are we doing Jason or are we doing Joe?
So I go back to 500 BCE.
I'm at 1300 BCE.
Whoa.
Joe.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's
Right on.
drop it.
Okay. So, let me just add that just to memorialize it forever. All right. Avocado toast is the devil. Not approved. But anyway, let's talk about the four elements because that is more fun than avocado toast. And so, yeah, let's talk about, we're going to talk about a lot of Eastern philosophies when it comes to the four elements, sometimes the five elements. But we're not going to do a show on the five elements because that is, that's hit or miss on which mythologies and which cultures had five elements as opposed to four. Some of them came later. Damn you to hell. He does not. So for our podcast listeners, they are talking about green beans and avocado toast. So equal parts hate right there. Okay. Equal hate. So FYI. But yeah, let's go to our Indian brothers first. So as far back as about 1000 BCE, there's references to a lot of Hindu writings and things like that talk about five, unfortunately. So they do include the void, but their traditional elements are there: earth, water, fire, and air do show up in the Vedas. And they do note that all of creation was made up of those five, not four elements. So that is some of the earliest writings that you see. I know Jason is going to start probably in Greece, I'm feeling. So, but before we get to the 500s BCE, ooh, look at that. Maybe we'll do that.
Fortuitous.
Yes. We won't talk about green beans. So, and then let's go over to our Far Eastern, to the ancient Chinese. They go back as about 700 to 800 BCE. But again, they talk about five elements, and it's funny because it's a different fifth element. I just keep thinking of that Bruce Willis movie every time I say fifth element. Their five elements were fire, earth, water, metal, and wood. So they were looking at it from more of the physical properties. But again, that's pre-Greek influence on the four elements. But as I'm sure Jason is about to start talking about, the pre-Hellenistic Greeks did start with the four traditional primordial elements.
You don't know what I'm going to talk about.
Well, I guessed because I'm smart. Go.
So let's talk about pre-Hellenic Greece. Specifically, pre-Socratic philosophy. So up until this point, the four elements were seen as tools for the deity or deities. They were implements of creation, not the created implements themselves. And so pre-Hellenic philosophers like Parmenides and Heraclitus in and around 500 to 450 BCE, kind of broke with that mythological origins, and instead kind of in a very, I don't know if it's more like, pre-Kant philosophy or not. They said, okay, what the earth and the creation is everything we can perceive, right? Based
Right.
on our senses.
Well,
And
based on that, just real quick, like it's an interesting association because you started with kind of the assumption that like these elements had deities associated with it, right? Because we talk about how there was sun worship and stuff way back in Druidic and pre-Egyptian, right?
Some of the
Religious
oldest.
context,
Yeah,
right?
some of the oldest, yeah.
So it would make logical sense that there would be a deity for fire and there would be a deity for wood and earth, right? So that would make a lot more sense in a polytheistic
yes,
construct, right?
yes,
And so you're saying now we're getting into a little bit more of a reasoned nature when you're starting into
yes,
the Greek or Hellenistic style of logically thinking through what these things mean instead of just doing it on faith alone.
yeah. And so these philosophers in particular, kind of sought to explain reality based on constructs. This is around the time of the cult of Pythagoras. And so the cult of Pythagoras was trying to explain everything on earth through the construct of numerology and mathematics. These philosophers wanted to explain all of existence based on what we can perceive with our five senses. And so they, interesting, kind of splintered into two groups. There were the monists and the pluralists. And so the monists, monad or monad one, thought that there was one element that was preeminent above all others, and that was the element of water. Whereas yeah, so that was in about 620 or so BCE. Thales of Miletus proposed that water is the primordial element and the fundamental element out of which every other element propagates. Whereas we get a little bit later on, about 50 years later, and we get Empedocles of Icaragus, who formulated the theory of the four elements to explain the generation and corruption of matter. So fire, earth, water, and air are all equal partners, and they are what is responsible for the creation and destruction of everything. And really, really interesting because these philosophers explain that everything down to a material and its color is due to the different mathematical makeup of the four elements within that piece of matter. And so the elements join together to form matter and then separate upon death or degradation, corruption. So, as far as mathematical proportions are concerned, bones, for example, consist of 4 parts fire, 2 parts of earth, 2 parts of water, and no air.
And a dash of oregano.
Being predominantly fire, because fire goes white and is associated with white, whereas water, the antithesis of fire, is black. And so you can now explain a spectrum of all of the colors.
Well,
it's kind of like how we have the periodic table today, and we that we have molecules that are made up of multiple atoms.
Yes.
You're skipping ahead there because the molecule thing that just blew people's minds, right? And the molecule came a little bit after what Jason was talking about, but
I think, in a corresponding way, right? That
absolutely.
Now everything comes down to these 4 elements,
right? And before we get to
together.
You add the little salt, little pepper, little salt bay, magic happens. But no, seriously, the one of the things that Jason was touching on, and I kept trying to interrupt him to coax that pony, but before we get to the philosophy of it, you got to understand that these first primordial elements were the smallest packets of nature that people could understand, right? You couldn't break it down smaller. And they were actually, the term atom actually shows up in around the 450s BCE because they thought that fire or water or air or earth could not be broken down into anything smaller, even though they didn't know what the hell they were talking about because atoms weren't discovered for about another 1100 years. But the ancients, they believed water could not be broken down into anything else, and fire could not be broken down into anything else. That was the fundamental building blocks of all of creation, were those. Yeah.
Like when Joe has corn for dinner. It can't be
Indeed.
broken down.
Can't be
into
broken
anything
down
else.
into smaller pieces.
Smaller forms. That's right. And you mentioned some awesome folks there. Thales of Miletus, awesome dude.
You mean Thales?
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 Okay.
No.
Tamales. And
Made of tomato? Yes.
Empanadocles.
Ooh. I love it. But it's funny, you mentioned Empedocles. He was actually the very first person who postulated the existence of air. Yeah, so he actually did an experiment. He was a person who did experiments and experimental, I don't want to say scientist, but he showed that a bowl filled with air inverted in water didn't immediately fill up. There was that bubble that rose. And so he showed the separation between water and whatever was keeping the water out of the rest of the bowl, and that was air. So yeah, experiments.
It's groundbreaking.
Woo!
For that time.
Love it. Yep. Keep going, Jason. I'm jazzed.
Nice.
Tell me more.
Well, I was going to turn it over to you to jump over to Aristotle.
Well,
Aristotle.
Aristotle.
Aristotle. Yes.
Because Aristotle took that kind of pre-Hellenic philosophy as a base and then added his own spin onto it, as was his prerogative.
You make him sound like a thief.
No.
Okay. So tell me about Aristotle, Joe.
You tell me about Aristotle. Well, so Aristotle, or Aristotle, as his homies called them, he did postulate that idea that the four elements, earth, water, air, and fire, again, made up all of the matter, and that matter and those building blocks of everything that we saw was the cornerstone of philosophy, of science, and even medicine. And, his ideas basically ran stuff for about 1500 years. Interestingly enough, there were, I'll have to pull up the name and find it after, but we were talking about atoms before and how atoms were not
to be trusted.
Not to be trusted. Yes.
Because they make up everything.
That's right. But, people were postulating the idea about them, but it was sacrilegious to even talk about atomic theory, because if you had substances that were atoms, then that was a dad joke. The powers that be, which were the Catholic Church at the time in Europe and things like that, they didn't like the idea of breaking creation down to something that could be observed, because it's ineffable, right? And we don't talk about things that are ineffable. So it kind of languished for about over 1,000 years. And it was actually a French Catholic priest that wrote a paper in the 1400s talking about atomic theory. And he probably published it under a pen name or something like that.
That's dangerous stuff.
Most dangerous. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Aristotle applied the four elements to, he actually talked about fifth elements. He did talk about the ether, right? And the ether was a separate element, which was groundbreaking at the time, because, the ether actually lived all the way up until the time of Albert Einstein. And it wasn't until the early 1900s where they were like, holy crap, the ether is completely made up and full of crap, and we don't like it. So let's actually do science and figure out what is actually in space. So
I thought it was just the reality stone.
No, it is not. But back to Aristotle, the big thing with him that changed the way that people looked at these four elements was that he talked about them in a way that people could relate to them. So he talked about their properties. Water is cold and is wet. Fire is hot and dry. So people were kind of like what you were talking about from a philosophical standpoint, Jason. People were relating these primordial elements to their feeling or how you could touch them or how you could interact with them, their color, their temperature, things like that. So, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, right there.
Yeah. So I want to jump off on that if you don't mind, because I thought this was fascinating doing research for this. That, how do you identify if something has fire in it, right? Back to that, how the bone is 6-part fire and all this, right? So
4 parts, but yes.
It basically started with the Empedocles system, but added this hot and cold element as well as a dry wet element. So you can see here that
it's the first time someone ever said you'll be okay. It's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat in the fire. That's funny.
I'm sorry to all of our listeners.
It's dad joke number 2 for
no.
for you tonight. This is 2 in a row.
He's at that age now.
I know.
Dad jokes,
He's got his new kicks, and cargo shorts, and grilling.
Got a little pocket knife,
tongs.
Little pocket knife hanging in his pocket right there.
Clicking the tongs twice before he uses them. Yeah,
gotta make sure they work.
So let's see. So anything that would be dry and hot would be fire. Anything that would be dry and cold would be earth. Anything that would be hot and wet is air, and then cold and wet for water, right? So this made logical sense when you looked at how you interacted with your senses in the world. So you could actually move the properties of an element into different stages, because as you can imagine, like you can go from liquids to solids to liquids to gases, and then now we know as plasma to be the fire element as well. Practically, if you look at things like, let's just say you're heating clay up in an oven, then you could be thinking of that as driving off water, clay being your earth. You're driving off water and adding fire, and thereby transforming that clay into a hard plot. And then alternatively, substances could be changed one to another by thinking of how they move in their cycle. So water falls from the sky. Water, cold and wet, falls from the sky as rain. And then when the air, hot and wet, cools down. A piece of wood, on the other hand, which is obviously rich in earth, cold and dry, can burst into flame. Hot and dry when heated, when you add heat to earth. And so I think that was interesting. Also, the way they thought of this too, trying to make sense of the world. Another way to think of it is going from most dense to least dense, right? From the earth, water, air, and fire. Yes, Joe.
Question. So for this square, for the audio listeners, on what part of the square is a hot pocket?
A hot pocket. That would be under molten lava hot.
Okay, right on.
Yes.
Well, it depends. It's either frozen or molten lava hot.
Right.
It could be in between.
You said plasma, and the first thing I thought of was like the damn inside of a hot pocket is plasma.
It is. It really is. But 10 points for Jason getting the Jim Gaffigan reference. Yep. And some other things to think about too. Look at the human body, right? They also try to correspond these 4 elements with other things around us. So the human body in Genesis was made from clay, was made from the earth. The human body has mostly water inside of it. Was breathed in life by the Spirit of God, the air of God, and then your blood, your body temperature, stays up through these exothermic reactions that you have as fire inside of you. Yeah, I know.
I didn't know. I don't like that. Nope.
Yeah, there's a lot of fires going off in Joe's belly right now.
Yeah, we actually. I had Genesis 2 up on a slide, but we're not going to show it now because.
Oh, you did? Well, let's show it.
Literally ruined it.
No.
No, you were a ruiner. Yeah,
no.
You can throw it up there. Yeah, but I was actually going to talk about that as well, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. And I'm not good at Google Slides, folks, so that's why it looks like crap.
This is hot. This is nice.
My apologies, but yeah,
dude, learn contrast.
Listen, okay, now that your eyes are old, things are going to bother you now that never bothered you before. So
Your face has always bothered.
Can you increase the font on this?
yes, I could.
And
Give
hands.
me the large print edition.
And
Okay.
hands.
Let me get my readers on. Okay, so
Get my cheaters.
my blue blocking readers. Okay, so
Are those
what
like
John
gutters?
was referring to, they're the like Gen 1 blue blockers from like 2014. And I've had them on my desk ever since, and they're super yellow. I feel like I have like serious amounts of malaria inside my body when I'm wearing them. But I digress.
Looking a little jaundiced, Joe.
Yes, everything is looking jaundiced. So
Get them under a heat lamp.
would pay attention. What John was referring to
I can't read your slides.
Oh, okay. Well, put on these 10-year-old blue blockers and they'll just come up crispy. So what John was talking about was the second creation story that we find in Genesis, because there's two. There's not one, there's two. Okay. People seem to forget that. And people smush them together a lot, but there's two. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. At least two. But now we're talking specifically about the creation of man. And John made a fantastic point when he was talking about the four elements. And these two verses in Genesis 2 actually highlight all four of the elements. So and like I said, he read it already. So, but it says streams came up from the earth, so water. And then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground. That's earth, right? Primordial earth, not the crappy earth that we live on. And breathed life into his nostrils. That's air.
The Ruach.
And then the Ruach, John Ruach. And then finally, some scholars indicate that the living soul is the fire part, right? That burning, fiery aspect of our nature. But all those four elements go as far back as Genesis 2, which we know was written a little bit before Aristotle and Empedocles and all those.
A few years.
Yeah, by a few years. Yeah.
You're going to call him Empedocles from now on. I love it.
Dude, I want a damn empanada now. I'm just fiending it now. But yeah.
No, but yeah. So again, what I like is they were trying to explain it from a scientific perspective, but yet it also has biblical references as well. Right. So this is also another reason why you see like the spiritual alchemy movement kick on in like the 1300s, because like, oh, I could see how we can take this symbolic representation of the four elements and apply it to different sections of the Bible, the Talmud, and so on and so forth. Right. Another example, just to keep running with the Bible example, like when you look at the story of Noah and the flood. Which version, Jason? But I don't know. It doesn't matter. We'll pick one of them and roll with it, right? So another way to interpret that in a classical elements set is when you look at the material sin that most of the human beings were doing at the time. It was a very earthy sin, living for the present moment, not spiritual things. And so along came a purifying flood, which was water, and then after 40 days, then you had Noah sending out birds of the air, the raven and the dove. And then finally, after landing on Mount Ararat, had a burnt sacrifice to God, thanking him. So you actually had the fire at the culmination of the story. So the story arc contained those four classical elements as well.
What about the rainbow? That's like the best part of the story, and you left it out. What's the rainbow?
Ooh, okay. Fifth element?
I like it. Mila Jovovich.
I am a meat popsicle. So again, there's precedent there, right? Is it a stretch? Maybe, but like at least there is something that you can go back to from a spiritual aspect to relate these material properties of the four classical elements.
I don't think it is a stretch, John, and here's why. Because we're so accustomed, and I'm sure people watching this are like, you guys are so full of crap, but you got to remember, when the stories of Genesis and pre-Hellenized Greek philosophers were sitting around talking, they didn't have the Science Channel. They didn't have How the Universe Works. They didn't have Neil deGrasse Tyson. So the stories that they shared and that they imparted with people, the religion, the science, the history, it was all mushed into one big thing. It was story time.
Sir Isaac Newton, right? He spent most of his writings on alchemy. Like over 50% of his writings were on alchemy, because he was trying to merge this religion and science together. You're absolutely right.
He wrote more about religion than he did about science. Yep.
That is true.
Boom.
So yes, so we have that. Where else do we go from here? So we've got we've talked a little bit about Aristotle building off of Empedocles and his
I love it.
his system. It's not Empedocles if you're trying to take notes, of the cold, hot, and dry, wet system here. And yet, when you take it to other degrees, now you start having other associations than scientific. So do we want to keep pulling that scientific thread for a bit before we switch over to that? Or, I don't know what else you got for that.
Yeah, I actually had, I was adding to the slides here. Let me see if you got them here.
Okay.
Did you make them legible this time?
It's a picture, so you can go scratch your behind. Okay.
You usually do that for me.
It needs a scratching stick.
It's not doing it. I have the.
No, I got it. Don't worry about it.
Do it. Do the thing.
Do
The
the
scratching
thing.
stick.
Do the thing,
The
Google man.
wand. I got the wand.
I got the big thick wand for.
There you go. It's
Do it.
screen 2. There we go.
Do it. Yeah, there it is.
What are we seeing here?
That is another
Hazardous
interpretation.
chemicals.
It is not. It could have been, depending on who we're talking about, but that is the Native American medicine wheel, or a depiction of it. And it also talks about, so again, completely different part of the world, right? Separated by an ocean. But our Native American brothers and sisters, they refer to the 4 elements in a lot of the same ways that their Western counterparts did, or Western European ones did as well. So, you've got stuff like earth, air, fire, and water. And they, in their medicine wheel, represented directions, represented the 4 seasons, the 4 cardinal directions, the different cycles, Mason alert, the different cycles of man, from birth, youth, manhood, old age, all represented here. And it also represents the different races that the Native Americans had become exposed to at some point. So they had the indigenous
interesting.
Americans, the Asians, the Europeans, and those from Africa.
Well, I'll be darned.
Yeah.
I like it.
So they're pretty cool too.
That is super cool.
Indeed.
While we're on that topic too, I have another slide here that is kind of hard to see.
Well, we're going to piss Jason off.
Yeah, the contrast, Jason. Sorry about the contrast in advance here. Okay. Let's talk about the humors.
Fine.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, he can't see the black on black text. So what you're looking at here was also another correspondence, which comes from the Greek physician Hippocrates, which is often credited with developing the theory of the 4 humors of the blood, right? So this is like internal to the human body, that it broke to these 4 elements of blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. So there was a correspondence there, and you can see where they are indicated and where they fall on the hot, cold, wet, dry thing. Now, this was kind of this was really forward thinking, right, for medicine, for almost thousands of years almost, until really they got past all of this, like it's bad in your blood, in the mid 1800s, when they started talking about germ theory. So again, remember, like even George Washington
reference.
Yeah. Ooh. George Washington, died because they were like, well, something bad in your blood. We got to get this, got to do some bloodletting. Could you get that bad blood out of there? And yeah, but so this is for even up to his time frame, they were still thinking of these 4 humors, or the natural scientific evolution of these 4 humors as part of that.
I'm kind of okay with yellow bile and phlegm, because those happen. Anybody with kids knows that happens on the daily. But what the hell do you have to do to contract black bile? Like what's going on?
Licorice sticks.
Diarrhea.
Are you going to Chili's one too many times? Like what's going on there? What is happening?
Too many Empedocles.
Yes.
We're going to get so much hate for this episode.
I know. You guys are being too humorous.
Stop it. Oh, like the 4 humors. I'm just surprised that
Was
Joe
it
hasn't.
dad humor, inappropriate humor, fart humor, and
Dad jokes.
Well, we got the dad jokes covered. Yeah.
yeah, that was the first one.
But I'm surprised Joe hasn't like leapt through the screen and corrected your bad Greek pronunciation.
We'll
'Cause
talk. We'll talk. We'll talk.
I
in a
wasn't
minute.
even going to attempt it. I know my limits.
I appreciate you. But speaking of Greeks, I think you
let's talk
you
about
actually
Greeks.
touched on this, and Jason actually touched on this when he first started, was that those pre-Socratic Greeks that were talking about these elements and talking about how primordial they were, there was a big fist fight for decades on which one came first, which was that arche, that proto element that came before all the other four. So it wasn't until, I'm going to say his name right, Empedocles, first talked
Empedocles?
about those. Yes, I was trying to be serious, folks. Joe serious, Jason dad jokes. So, he was the first one to say, "Hey, there's four. Deal with it. Shut up." But before that, there were people arguing over which one was that prima materia, or that first matter from which all of them came. You had Heraclitus, who was a big fan of fire. You had Thales, who said water was the first element, and then Anaximenes, who said air was the first thing. So again, for a long time, people argued about which came first, chicken or the egg. But then Empedocles, to Jason's point, drove it home and said, "Stop bickering. They're all primordial. They're the first four. Deal with it." And then Aristotle threw out ether and pissed everybody off. So boom.
Well,
Now, you could actually take these and run with it and start applying these four systems, these four elements to other hierarchies. And that's, again, where we'll go much deeper into the specific elements in future episodes. But at a broad brush, right? The simplest one to relate back to Freemasonry are, and you guessed it in the chat, the four cardinal virtues. And so one way to think about it is how they are presented, right? So there's not a direct correlation between the four cardinal virtues and the four elements, at least not according to anything that like St. Thomas Aquinas wrote. But when you look at the artwork that was very predominant of these different archetypes, you'd see things like for temperance, you'd often see temperance with a jug, right? Usually for liquids of some sort, right? You were trying to be temperate of liquids, so that would
Two
be the
of
water
cups.
element. Yeah, exactly. The fortitude would be, the spirit of fire, like your
manifestation.
you're manifesting things. Prudence is interesting because in a lot of early Christian artwork, you'd see prudence with a mirror or with a snake. And so when you see the snake there, that's the material earth, a creature that crawls on the earth. And then, justice would have the scales and would often be holding a sword.
Air.
For air, right? So you have those four elements loosely corresponding to the archetypes that are associated with those cardinal virtues.
I love the snake one for earth or ground, and we'll flesh that one out more during the earth episode. But yeah, there's a lot of symbolism in, a snake crawls on the ground on his belly, doesn't even have legs, and all the things that are associated with that. So I'm super jazzed for that.
Well, again, it's kind of that correlation between dust, right? And then the creation story with, Adam being formed out of dust from the earth.
But that was super awesome primordial dust. That wasn't like the crappy dust that like we bury people in, and there's like rotting trees, and because everything was paradise. Remember, it was super awesome dust. It was
sure.
great.
Yeah.
Awesome dust.
The best dust ever. But yeah, so when it gets to the expulsion of paradise and, them having to kill things to put over their special parts, because they realize they're naked and stuff, then the earth starts to get corroded, I guess, for lack of a better term. But
fig
more
aprons.
on earth later.
So tell us about Sir Isaac Newton, Joe.
What about him?
What did he do?
He was the man.
Oh.
He was the man. Yes. So we're skipping ahead a lot. So
what else you got then?
Okay. So we talked about the Greeks. And then basically this primordial element theory lasted for a very long time. And it was,
Right.
again, I mentioned it earlier, it was more political and sociological than it was actually scientific. You know, there was basically a rut in time across most of Europe that we like to call the Dark Ages, right? Where
Dun, dun,
nothing got
dun.
done, you know, and everybody was afraid to do things and everybody was afraid to speak. So both philosophy and science kind of came to a grinding halt for a long time. But after about 1,000 years, people got kind of sick of it, right? So you had people in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment that start to talk about, you know, these theories of matter, and Isaac Newton was a big proponent of it, and especially when it came to his studies in alchemy, which was a precursor to chemistry.
Woo. Yeah. So so I tried to find some alchemical connections. I've seen different pieces of artwork that try to relate the four classical elements with, say, salt, sulfur, and mercury. And the interesting thing is, I haven't seen anything that's consistent. So that whenever I do like esoteric research, like everyone's got their different view and their lens that they view the world in. So I try to take a syncretic view of research in the sense of, if the majority of people are using this system, then that's good enough. But if there's no consistency to the placement or the order of things, then I get I get a little skeptical. So I was trying to find, an illustration that shows the four classical elements aligned to, how do you combine them to form salt, sulfur, and mercury. But again, I didn't want to show something and be misleading, because there really was no agreement on that.
No, and it's kind of hard to do that, right? Because when you're talking about the alchemical process and those three ingredients, let's call them, they're more a process of change than of an actual building block, right?
Right.
So it's you're trying to line things up that aren't gonna line up.
And also I've seen them try to be corresponding to like the 7 steps of alchemy, right, of the great work. And so you're now trying to fit 4 things into 7 holes, and you're like, it doesn't add up right. So
Okay. I don't know what kind of parties you go to, buddy, but
a lot of good alchemy parties.
We make it work. Alchemy parties.
Alchemy parties.
Put that on Eventbrite.
Nice.
Jason's 40th alchemical shindig.
So what I will share is some of my Noahide presentation actually talks a little bit about the alchemical context of the Noahide flood.
Nice.
Yeah. And so pulling that window up, give me just a second.
Is the contrast going to hurt my eyes?
Yes.
Should I put on my
yes, because it's my old slides that spoiler alert, the presentation is undergoing a complete and utter overhaul.
It's converting it from Office 97.
Yeah. So
those are the 4 elements.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I knew that.
Okay, cool. So got this actually out of one of Tim Hogan's books, and really just looking at the story of Noah with the hero's journey. Like, you have the pre-flood or antediluvian world obsessed with the material. It's money and pleasure and just kind of rooted in earth. Then you have that water, that cleansing initiatic flood that sweeps away all of that profane. The distillation stage, as John mentioned, is that dove or raven released after the flood, and the burnt offering upon exit from the ark is the fire calcination stage. I know those are out of order, but that is a way that these things kind of make sense to me.
But you're putting them, number one, awesome. I always love when you show these slides. And number 2, you're putting them in the correct order, right? Because you've got different people will place the 4 elements in different ways, either in a square where they're all equal parts, or from a descending to an ascending. I just went all Jason Greek on this.
Empanaticles.
Empanatically said. So, but you got it. No, you got it in an ascending order, which is spot on, right? You've got earth, and then you've got water, and then you've got air over the water, and then fire hangs out in the sky, keeps everybody toasty. So spot on.
Hey, bring up that slide one more time, because there's actually something that a little easy way to remember the shape of the alchemical symbol of the 4 elements, right? So,
Okay.
just for me, this is how I think about them when I'm trying to think about how to draw the triangles, which one's up, which one's down, which ones have the line through it, right? So imagine like the globe, right? And you're actually you're underneath the sea. You're all the way at the very bottom of the sea, right? That would be where the deepest part of the earth, right? So earth actually has, let's see, wait a minute. Let me check your symbols here. Yeah, so earth is that line that you're digging down past the earth, right? So then right above the earth is pointing downward water. So it's like imagine if you were to pull that triangle up, from the bottom of the sea. Now it's just water. You're just in the sea. So that triangle's pointing down, and then
This makes no sense.
oh, come
I
on.
see what he's saying.
You know,
I see what he's saying.
and I think I disagree with the symbols that you have here. It's gonna bug me now. Rats. We're gonna find that for those future episodes, because we're gonna get the right symbols here. Because I think this I disagree with where the line is placed on these. And I'm sure that some of the listeners of the show are going to find this too. So,
Oh my head.
I will hold my thoughts for later, because it made much more sense as I was doing my research, but not now.
I'm not okay. All right.
I don't know.
Wait. I'm making a list of
You see where we're going with this.
things I care about. John, placement of the lines. It's on the I don't care list.
You know what I
It's
care about?
Artistic license.
Yeah. Your face is artistic license. Okay, next up.
Thanks, my mama made it.
Can she get a refund? The next one is the last thing that I have, just as far as like correlations go. There's another thing. Again, I pulled out of the same book, The Elements of the Elements by Tim Hogan. It's a brief summary of the different aspects of it. A really good overview if you are interested in diving deep into the different elements, where they come from, what they symbolize, because we're going to get into a lot more of this symbolism in future episodes. But I have seen other pieces of artwork of the body trying to relate at least the torso and above to the alchemical, or sorry, not the alchemical, the classical elements, where I think it's either John Dee or I'm gonna have to find the reference to that too. I'm just losing it tonight. But I wrote down that the head has is corresponding to fire, because it has the tongue energy, like the words of the mouth, how you express yourself. The chest is related to air, like through the lungs, but also through the heart. And then the abdomen, your stomach, holds the water. Right. So from just looking from your stomach up, you have water, air, and fire. And I guess you're standing on the earth, or the lower parts of man are the earth. And this is taken out of other philosophical texts and diagrams, but I don't have it at the ready, so you have to believe me on that one. It's a much better correspondence than my little triangle description. That I'm going to get there. I'm going to show you how awesome my thought process is once Jason updates his charts.
Wow.
Okay.
I don't know what you just said, but it sounded great, and I love it. So,
love you too, Joe.
Kudos.
All right. So, let's start wrapping things up. Anything else to add about kind of the history, the science, the background of where these classical elements came from? Anything we missed?
I don't think we missed anything. I think it was a good high. I'm sure we'll get yelled at for not going into detail, but we promise you there's
We've got 4 more episodes to go into
shows.
detail.
Stick them together, make a 4-hour show. It's gonna be great.
Yep.
Yep.
Get some pizza, make it happen. Okay. Have a watch party or an alchemical shindig.
Yes.
Masonic Lodge lock in, like high school style.
Mm,
There you go.
right
That's
on.
interesting.
Yes, but no, I don't think we left anything out,
Okay.
and I think that it was a good high-level overview. I think we touched on a little bit of everybody, because most people just start with the Greeks and stay with the Greeks, but these concepts have been in existence far longer than the pre-Hellenized Greeks, for far longer, and it's been referenced in all the major groups that are out there, and the earliest writings far extend Empedocles and Aristotle and Heraclides and all those dudes. But again, they're the most prominent and they were the most written and they're the most talked about. So that's why they get a lot more credence than other folks. But everybody talks about them.
Awesome. All right. Final question of the night, and we won't be skipping ahead. So this will give you some opportunity to think about it. The question for you is your favorite classical element and why? And so you can pull from the symbolism that we haven't talked about yet, but let's prime the pump and think about what is your favorite classical element and why. Let's start with Devil Hands, Joe Martinez.
I'm gonna go with fire.
Fire!
Yes.
You can't go with fire.
Why? That's yours?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll scrub out everything that I'm about to say, but fire is my
I
favorite.
mean, it won't be relevant anyway.
I'll say something weird so that you can come in.
This Joe is on fire.
That's right. I show up in much fire symbolism. I am fire
Burning
symbolism.
in my soul.
In your face. But no, fire is my favorite of the 4. It is the one most associated with the heavenly things, and that's my favorite things to think about. So I'm gonna shut up so Jason has something else to say. So fire for me.
What?
Love y'all. See you next week.
Yeah, that's nice.
Don't cut yourself short
Happy
on
birthday.
my account.
Happy birthday, Jason.
It's for you, birthday boy.
Yay. So fire is my favorite element, specifically because it deals with manifestation. And so I kind of, I align myself more with the wand suits on the tarot, because it's a lot of project management, building new things, bringing people together, and like doing really, really cool stuff, which is what I do for work. And so that's just kind of how my brain operates and how my mind thinks.
Woo. Awesome. Good answer. Very good. All right. Then over to me. Let's see. For me, mine, my default, while I like all the spiritual woo-woo stuff that you guys do too, my
Avocado.
default is the element of the avocado. No, the element of
The
air.
avocado toast.
The avocado toast, unlike Joe Martinez. The element of air is related to the swords in the tarot, and also it's one of the, I think, fixed signs of the Aquarius, because I'm an Aquarius, so I default generally to the intellectual over the emotional, and so it just relates more to me for those reasons. So for those reasons, I'm in. Here we go. Great episode. Good high level overview. Just what I wanted to cover without going too deep in all the symbolism, because we've got a lot of awesome stuff to cover there. So stay tuned for the other 4 parts of this 5-part series. And I want to thank you all very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.
Fire.
Wow.